YouTube. And we're live. Here we go. I'll let the little ding in it this time. Never mind. Live anyway. Close that. And here we are, live. Welcome to another episode of enLIGHTen Up with Div, and joined today by Kalli, her duelist.
Hello.
And so today we were discussing polarity in relationships, and relationship dynamics. We had watched a video by the holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera, and the video was called "Are You in Love? Are You in Trauma?" It talked about the differences between trauma coupling and bonded relationships. So following on from, we just thought we would talk about that a little bit and how that is playing out and relevant. So what are your thoughts so far, Kalli, on that?
Well, after watching the little video last night, the first aha was that it's nearly like we're so used to the drama in relationships that when you do meet someone where it just seems like easy and simple, it's like, well, hang on a minute, this isn't what it's supposed to be like, because the other way is so different. So that was one of the first things that I noticed watching the videos.
Yeah, that's because a lot of our society, the media seems to present these trauma couplings as the ideal type of relationships, where they're really intense and they burn hot and heavy. So a really key difference between the two relationships is one's like a fire starter and like love at first sight, sparks, super intense, whereas bonding relationships, so you get to know each other, and the more you know each other, the more the attraction builds, and it's like a slow, steady burn. It's very different. It's between like a log fire versus, you know, a gasoline. Like it's a very different type of burn. Yeah. And so as Kalli was saying, we live in a world that kind of teaches us that the ideal romantic relationship is these trauma couplings. And what we mean when we say a trauma coupling is when two people come together through unresolved childhood wounding. And we were discussing, is it possible for it to be just on one side, one person that's attracted and not the other? And what do you reckon about that?
Oh, well, I guess I can only really go by my past experiences so far. It's a tricky one. I would say that it's both. However, one obviously becomes more obvious first than the other one. So, you know, it's a lot easier to blame sometimes, or to make it out like it's the other person. But if we've attracted that person, then perhaps, well, I would say at this stage it would be both. But we did speak about, if you meet someone who's more of a bonding relationship where it takes time to mature and grow and all that, and you know, it's a more easier, slower process type thing. If you have that grounding, that footing already, and then someone in the relationship does encounter some type of trigger or trauma or something, whether it's external out of the relationship or internal, you already have that bonding basis to go by. So I think you've spoken about this in another one of your talks about you mentioned when we're feeling resourceful, then we don't really need the other person for anything, so everything's already inside us. So if we're in a relationship that is stronger and like bonded and has all the appropriate foundation, that when we do come up with a situation, then we can either clearly ask for that to be met, and if it's not, then that's a different story, or depends what's going on. But then there's like ways of dealing with these situations when they arise that are a lot healthier than when you're starting out in a trauma relationship and then just going through that. It'll just be more difficult, I would say.
What you're pointing to, Kalli, is that so with these trauma couplings, this type of romantic relationship that's most often called attraction, it quite literally is attraction because there's a polarity there. There's the same way magnets attract one another. Yeah. There's the neither person is neutral in themselves, and if all it takes is one person being neutral, and there isn't that polarity anymore, there isn't that attraction. And it's one thing to consciously choose to do the dance, either person moving from different aspects of their own polarity, like masculine and feminine. But when we're talking about wounding, it's not a conscious choice. Instead of feeling this is a role that we can play and we have the freedom and flexibility to move in and out, we get tricked into thinking this is who we are and how we are. And with bonded relationships, so when they say opposites attract, that's a phrase we often hear, right, regarding relationships, opposites attract. That's referring to trauma coupling. Bonded relationships are not like that. That's when like similarity, like-minded people. That's referring to that, because as John Gottman from the Gottman Institute, he can predict with something like 94% accuracy whether a couple will divorce or stay together within the first like 5 minutes of meeting.
Wow. Yeah. What's his like? Does he have like what's some of it?
So the very first thing, one of his books, he's written several books. One of his books is the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Yeah. And guess what the very first principle is? Friendship.
Friendship. Okay. Yeah,
friendship is the very first principle, and that's the core of a bonded relationship. That is the core of a bonded romantic relationship. And so it's challenging when people will say, oh, well, I'm not really attracted to him, because they're dismissing that friendship as a basis of attraction. The metric that's being used is these trauma coupling types of attraction. And that requires some rewiring if we choose to be in a kind of steady, supportive, what were other words that you used in speaking about when trauma might be triggered from the external world, something will come up. Yeah, that both people are neutral in themselves, able to hold themselves. Like a conscious relationship will, I mean, one person can choose to, like it only takes one to bring consciousness into a relationship, and we can do it in any which way we choose. And lest I sound like I'm saying one's better or worse, it's just, what are you wanting? What are you wanting? Are you wanting a dynamic where the triggers are coming from inside your relationship? Or are you wanting a dynamic where the relationship is kind of the pairing that supports you, where triggers might come from the outside world? Which isn't to say that they won't also come from inside, because they can come from anywhere, right? Like when things come up, they're within us and they can come from anywhere. So it's not to say it's just a different approach. The bonded relationships have a very different quality to them than trauma relationships. They have a very different quality. Trauma relationships, and trauma relationships can transform into bonded relationships. And I suspect, I don't think it's actually, maybe it's possible for it to go the other way as well. I don't actually know if a bonded relationship can transform into a trauma one. But I know trauma ones can transform into bonded ones when both people, as they clean up their own codependent patterns. That can happen.
So would a trauma couple be the output of two people that haven't been doing the inner work? Like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct. That's what a trauma coupling is.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yet we spoke about having an experience where with one person I can have more of a trauma coupling experience, and then with another person I can have more of a bonding experience.
It's the dynamic that's created, right? So it's like, I think of it from the periodic table of elements, different, when we interact, we're just atoms vibrating, right? We're just energy and motion, all of us. And so when we interact with different energy fields, different things come up.
Yeah.
Right? So like this energy field has a lot of resonance. This energy field over here and this energy field, we come together, there's quite a bit of resonance. Right? That's what enables us to work together, deliver workshops together, that's what because there's resonance there. There are some people that you would meet and there wouldn't be the same degree of resonance with.
So I guess you can look at it like an analogy would be when you're building a home, like an actual house. And one is built on a really solid foundation, solid footing, and the other one isn't. If there's a tremor of some type, the one that doesn't have that solid footing would probably crumble a lot quicker. Whereas the other one, it still may tremble a little bit, and there still might be like little odd jobs that need to be done around the house. But it can be like, can we actually work this out? Can we sort this issue out? Or maybe we need some external support to help with this. Or so it's not always about, like, you still may be unresourceful as in some instances in a couple. However, you're honest about it and you can talk about it and you can move through challenges with more ease and grace, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, I imagine that, for me at least, is the goal of any kind of partnering, is to support one another in our like in terms of, when I'm saying partnering, I mean life partnering, is to support one another in our life's work. And for me in particular, cleaning up has a lot to do with that. And the more we clean up, the quicker it gets to move through, the more elegant it gets. Like, I think about my earlier versions of me who so unresourced that triggers would be met with screaming and shouting and all kinds of behaviors that were some would even call violent, and how that's changed over the years, how that's become non-reactive behaviorally, still feeling a sense of rise in energy, and so just moving through what's the layer, what comes up, and how to address it and respect it respectfully. How to be with what arises, and in a way that's comfortable, for useful for all involved. Yeah. So, any last things?
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you can go from a trauma relationship to a bonding relationship. And I think, do you think the same would go for the other way around?
I think it would be harder, because it's kind of like, what I imagine is, and I could be wrong, I don't actually know, but I imagine it would be trickier to go from a bonded relationship into a trauma relationship in that context, because that person's already it's not to say that trauma won't be elicited elsewhere and be dealt with and affected. Most people in it, but for the relationship to transform in that way, it's like, I think of it like, when you polish the rough edges of a diamond, can't really bring the rough edges back.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. That's that, and if, I don't know if you've ever seen the difference between an uncut diamond, a rough diamond, and a polished diamond. They look very different. Yeah. Very, very, very different. Yeah.
So, okay. And for anyone who's like watching this and going, oh, what is a trauma? Like what's a basic, what's an example of maybe being in a trauma relationship, and what's like one thing that someone can do to actually decide that actually this is no longer what I want, and taking that first step to making changes.
Well, if someone's, let's say someone grew up in a household with a parent that was emotionally withdrawn, so they just weren't available emotionally. They didn't join. They didn't connect. That's what they grew up with. That kind of script, that blueprint. That is what was conditioned into them. That's what feels familiar. That's what they'll recreate. That is what all of us will recreate unless we decondition ourselves from that. And that's what the enlightening up process is all about, is removing that conditioning. And so when a conditioned mind will seek a partner that's that same kind of experience, they'll be with somebody that's not emotionally available, and then as it starts to lighten up, they'll work out, oh, I actually would like to connect with someone. And the first steps is to kind of learn how to look inward rather than outward, and recognize that the external world is just showing us where there's some adjusting inside. And it's little inner work. So then from there, reach out. Feel welcome to reach out, and we can support you with resources and next steps. And yeah. Right. Yes. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much for joining and listening. And if you have any comments, pop them in the comments. And if not, I'll be back for another episode of enLIGHTen Up tomorrow with Deb, Diana, whoever decides to join me. So look forward to speaking to you then. Bye for now.
Bye for now.